If you love seafood, but you're intimidated by making it yourself, you're in the right place. We're gonna learn how to make mussels Fra Diavolo today. Super easy, 30 minutes. I got these mussels yesterday. What I do to keep them fresh is I have them in a little bowl in the fridge and I just cover them with a wet towel. So if you ever wanna buy them one day in advance, like if it's for Christmas Eve or something, you gotta get them the day in advance. You just throw this little towel over it. That's a great way to keep them moist and able to still breathe because they're still alive. So let's take a look at the mussels. Whenever we're making mussels in our own home, what we want to use is a farm-raised, rope-grown mussel. I know a lot of times when we talk about seafood, everybody wants to cook with a wild-caught seafood. Like you usually want wild-caught salmon, wild-caught snapper, but with mussels, you actually want to buy it farm-raised. These never actually are in the sand, which makes them super easy to clean, because wild mussels are purged out of the sand, so they are so gritty that you have to purge them for like hours at a time. Whereas rope-grown mussels, you really don't have to purge at all, and we're not going to today. All you have to do is look for any of the ones that have a little beard and you rip the beard off. So when we're prepping mussels, we're looking for two things. One, we're looking for anything that has a little bit of like a hairy beard. Second thing you want to look for is anything that's broken. So if you look at this one here, you can see it's completely shattered right here in the shell. This is no good. We want the mussels to be alive when we're cooking them so that they're as fresh as possible. So we're gonna throw anything away that's dead, pop that in there. So I go through these, I make sure there's no dead ones in there. And anything that has like a really open shell or cracked shell goes right in the trash one. What we'll do first is we'll rinse these mussels off, debeard them, and then we'll set them aside while we chop up some of our other ingredients for the sauce. So I'm just gonna pop these right in here. And I'll be back after I get them back from the sink. All right, so we're just gonna quickly go through. We're just gonna put all the good looking mussels into this bowl right here and debeard any that need debearding. So we'll grab like this one here, we'll pull that little bit off, throw it in the trash. We got about 2 pounds of mussels here, which is perfect for like 6 to 8 people an appetizer, I would say, depending on, you know, whether or not people like mussels or not. There's also a lot of lore about like, you can only eat mussels in certain months of the year or else you can get really sick. Again, that really goes for wild mussels, not farm-raised mussels. We're gonna put the mussels away for a minute while we prep the sauce. The sauce is just like a basic marinara, but I use white wine and Calabrian chili peppers to give it the Fra Diavolo. So we wanna make it pretty spicy. So what we'll do is we'll start with prepping some garlic, mincing it, and then some onion as well. I know in a lot of Italian recipes, people say not to mix garlic and onion. I think that in a recipe like this, I like to have a little bit of both flavors. We're not necessarily eating the sauce with the mussels. We're more so steaming the mussels from the sauce. So I think adding a lot of these flavors is helpful. The sauce is also mostly for when I dip my bread in after, not so much for the actual enjoyment of the mussels part. This is a huge onion, so we're just gonna use like maybe a third of it. Again, we want to really mince it up pretty small so that we're not getting like huge chunks of onion in the sauce. I've recipe tested this one a lot. So I've made mussels Fra Diavolo like every year for Christmas for like the past 5 years now. The one thing that I've learned is you need a lot of steam and a lot of heat to get these things to open up. So what doesn't work is cooking them in the oven. So what I've tried one year when I was making a huge batch for a huge Christmas Eve we were doing, I tried to make the sauce and then place all of the mussels in a tray in the oven and steam them in there. That does not work. The power of the stovetop and how much heat you can get like on the actual sauce and steaming it really makes a huge difference. This is way too much onion, so we're gonna do about half of it. I'm gonna use this right here. Then we're gonna mince up some garlic. I just crush it. A lot of this stuff you can do in advance. Like for example, you could probably make this whole sauce in a day in advance if you wanted. What you can't do is chop the ingredients in advance. As soon as you start chopping up the garlic, the flavor and the pungency is only going to exponentially increase over time. So the more you're letting it sit there, so if I was to put this in the fridge, it would be extremely garlicky over the course of a day. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make the sauce. We need to be able to do this in a covered pot, so make sure whatever you're using has a top to it. You could use aluminum foil, but something that's gonna keep the heat in is gonna be much better. What we're gonna do is start with a little bit of olive oil. I preach this, but whenever I'm doing anything like a mussels Fra Diavolo, anything where I'm really caring about the flavors of the dish, I wanna use a good high quality extra virgin olive oil versus just like your run-of-the-mill thing. You can taste the difference in the flavors. It's kind of like the same thing with wine. I'm not gonna cook with a wine that I don't like to drink because that's the flavor that I'm adding to the sauce. One of the things I like to do while the oil is heating up, I like to toss the parsley stems in. And what this does is it adds like a very mild, earthy flavor to, like earthy and herby flavor to the olive oil. But a lot of people say to me, does that really make that much of a difference? And the answer is no, right? Like how much could infusing olive oil in a dish like this make much of a difference? But I think that's every aspect of Italian cooking, is it's each individual little step that makes these dishes so good. Adding something like these parsley, is it gonna make a huge difference? No, but each single step makes a little difference that brings this huge outcome of like a delicious final product. So I just kind of stir these around until the oil gets hot enough for the onions. And we're just gonna saute our onions. Because these are cut so little, we're not gonna overdo them here. We're just gonna saute them until they're translucent. We'll go in with our minced garlic here. And let that get nice and fragrant before we start adding some of the other ingredients. So this is just your basic marinara sauce. Start here with the onions, garlic, or onions or garlic, depending on how you make it. What I do next is I go in with a tablespoon of tomato paste, and I just put it on the pan. I let it start kind of like caramelizing on the bottom of the pan. What this is gonna do is release a lot of the sugars in the tomato paste and bring out some of that depth of tomato flavor. Then, to really spice up Mussels Fra Diavolo, you have two options. You can go in with crushed red pepper, but what I like to do is use Calabrian chili peppers in oil. So I grab like, I don't know, it depends on how much heat you want to add. I'm going in with like maybe a teaspoon and a half. I'm gonna put it off to the side and let it start infusing some of that oil over there. And once I feel like the garlic is nice and fragrant, I'm gonna mix everything together and combine it. But I try to leave those two things pretty untouched while I'm mixing up the other ingredients, so that they can sort of develop on their own. All right, so we're gonna combine everything together now, let that tomato paste mix with all of the onions and garlic. You can see here, we started to get a little bit of a fond where the tomato paste was, which is exactly what we want. What I love about the Calabrian chili peppers is it gives a sweeter flavor than just the crushed red peppers on their own, and you can sort of start smelling it too in the oil as you start mixing everything together. What we're gonna do now is go in with some white wine to deglaze the pan. We're gonna go in with more than we would if we were just deglazing the pan. This is gonna be the majority of the sauce. While we'll add some whole plum tomatoes, it's a lighter sauce. What you'll do to deglaze the pan is we'll grab places like this fond, and you just wanna use your wooden spoon to kind of break off some of that stuff to add flavor to the sauce. We're gonna bring this to a simmer and then add our whole plum tomatoes. We wanna cook some of the alcohol out of the wine, so we don't wanna have that strong alcohol flavor coming off of the sauce while we're adding the whole plum tomatoes, so we'll wait at least until that goes away. You really want it to come to a simmer and reduce by about half. So the sauce is coming to a little bit of a simmer here in the middle. Just combine it, mix it up, make sure everything's getting together. I like to taste it at this point, see if I need any salt. We do. So as this is starting to reduce, it starts to thicken up a little bit, what we're gonna do is start adding in some of the plum tomatoes, and we're going to just hand crush in a couple of them. We don't need a ton of tomatoes in here, and I like them to be nice and chunky, so I like to crush them by hand. 2 pounds of mussels, you probably need about 14 ounces of whole plum tomatoes, give or take. I think another thing that's funny is a lot of people will comment on my videos like, I can't believe you're touching the tomatoes that everyone's gonna eat. I do wash my hands. I do. All right, so that's about all we need in terms of the crushed tomatoes. We want some of the tomatoes to cook before we start adding in the mussels. And we could always add a little bit more wine or even water to help increase the steam in the pan and still let the sauce develop. So we're gonna let this cook and simmer here now for about 15 minutes before we add the mussels. All right, while this sauce is cooking though, I wanna teach you one little hack. I get these Kirkland tomato pastes, and they come with so much tomato paste, and you're never ever gonna use a whole can of tomato paste like that. Here's what I do. I just take it, pop it in a plastic bag, and what I do is I just take it, and I make it into like little tablespoons. So I just break it up like that, and then I freeze it like this, so that what I do next time is I just grab out these little pieces of tomato paste that I need, and I just pop them right into the sauce, and they defrost immediately. So you just throw this right in the freezer. All right, so the sauce is ready for the mussels now. We're gonna lower the temperature just a little bit because we're gonna cover it. Drop these mussels right in. Spread them out. Cover them up. We're gonna let these steam for about 3 to 5 minutes in there until they start opening up, and then I'll show you what they're gonna look like. So we're letting the mussels steam right now. You can see some of them are starting to open up. We're gonna kind of mix them around. Cover it back up for a minute. All right, so as the mussels start opening, what we'll start to see, and like we'll take a look at this one right here. I'll bring it up to the camera. So what you see here is the mussels come off of the shell here. We know that this one is done. We can look at one like this one here where it's not completely open yet. This one's not cooked through yet. It's not ready. So you want to make sure that the mussel comes completely off the shell before you start pulling them out. I'm going to mix them up one more time. We'll cover them back up for another maybe minute or two and they should be done. What you're going to look for is to make sure that any and all of the shells have opened up. Anything that's not open at this point should be thrown away. So what we're going to do now is hit it with a little bit of this fresh parsley. That is mussels Fra Diavolo. I'm gonna try one out here. They're so tender. You're just gonna pull it right out of the shell. I'm gonna dip mine in a little bit of the sauce. Minka. At the bottom is this like delicious sauce, which, you know, these are tiny mussels. You're not gonna eat all the sauce with the mussels, but what you can do is grab your bread, dip it in there. It is my favorite thing to dip bread in, without a doubt. It is unbelievably delicious sauce. You can get the full recipe at my website, alwaysfromscratch.com. I publish all my recipes there. We've been around now for about 5 years, 250 some odd recipes on there, a lot of different mussels recipes, seafood recipes. Let me know what you want me to cook seafood-wise next. If you haven't already, just like, comment, subscribe below. It helps the channel grow. Enjoy Mussels Fra Diavolo. Let me know what you think. See you next time.